obviously arose. Where most organizations saw crises, cyber criminals saw opportunity. So what actually happened is, with employees around the world trading their offices and conference rooms for emails and instant messages and Zoom meetings, more sharing of sensitive information, okay, has migrated from the conference room whiteboards and face-to-face conversations and interactions to collaboration tools and extended email threads. The swell of digital activity has presented cyber criminals with numerous new opportunities for social engineering attacks. According to she has more experience in the field, and she's very good at things and control. She will do that. And he's the past experience and good professional with experience in the environment. This is and the data also necessary and very important cross extension. This is what she does. He also has some work to make making the security controls. He does a lot of things response and coordinates the and the DBS technical that comes on top of the area. Before I hand over to our speaker panelists, I'd like to welcome the Spanish Prime Minister very well, President de Norway, President of all of them, both Chamber and House for Land Courts, very well, and to please you are the all the chat for the webinar. After you, I'm handing over to Thomas, who will be our presenter. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm we'll talk about myself, which I feel of managed tax processes to business and and it's like preventing them to become risk attack, but really reputational and loss. So today I'll talk about how organized tax, organized relationships, so what we need with that market side of it, people that actually use it, and it's no next with the client and just yeah, the other people Microsoft leading role on this attachment some not have index of compromise or intelligence in that, which is already familiar for Microsoft. So this doesn't really this for shape. So it will say, document. You see, you would send around. This is the definition of how we call Microsoft. It's very easy to do that. It's literally just a menu you cook it and solve this trouble. Now again, on my fabric, right? On my firewall, on my team, we work on Microsoft 365 with zero trust environment, and we have a security option. But if you stage attack right, you would see that Microsoft Defender Office is the first line of defense, and Defender endpoint will actually be this line of defense, and they will signature right. Actually, and ensure that personally which can be detected, and that's what you make. That's like also the joke. With their but it didn't need because so moving to like first 7 is the dots where our organization contract just so this is right. So first thing I'm going to do is make a start with the thing I want to put in organization. And this instance I'm going to talk about Azure, which is our way to place with all systems and so there's also somebody access to this and be able to adjust the environment and initiate from there. So for research that's called a browser and as you'll know, you'll also do this and use what they want to. And I've got an application system called Burps. So this application allows me to make handle the specific direction that first is to go towards a browser and our internet. So you can show exactly where properties up here. And now I'm feeding data through towards and then when I'm in anything, we can see it doesn't load instantly. Once I've been shipped and I can see all of the packages in the background. So I'm going to turn on the save
I'm going to type in numbers. I can see something clicking inside that, but I've got a forward this post to Google itself, and they respond for it, and the post and responses are very verified. Eventually, as I do my first doing this site post. So the first thing we can do now is look at what happens when we log into a website. So you see there's different packages on different areas that I'm into right now, and in the background for every post that I take, there's something happening in the background. So it's quick to by my browser, and I can decide what I want to send and what I do not want to send through. So this is important because what I'm going to see is, first of all, we see user agent. So this is the exact browser and everything that I'm using. You can see my operating system here as well, and we are using Firefox in the latest version. So that's something important. And then I'm going to just forward this onwards to all the way to where we've got to do the login, and then from the login page, we'll see buttons typing in my boss and stuff. Right? So now I'm here. The problem is I don't really know which accounts I haven't done investigation on company and stuff, but I believe there is a tool that we use, and this tool is called Object. So what I'm doing is that the file executable. This file actually goes and it checks the emails on specific client environments. So because we use this Nedscaper.com domain, normally emails associated with this, emails associated with this, and we output on with email list. And thus we can see that this Nedscaper.com is a valid account, and so it means that I should be able to log in with this account. Now, so I'm going to try and just yes, it is indeed a valid account. So again, I've got to accept the request, send it forward, and I just follow these as they're not important. But once we get to the next page, this is where we enter the password. So now this is important because from now it's sent through, and I'm going through to sign actually to this. Okay, going through, and as part of the string, we'll see different tokens. Here we see demo at Nedscaper account. And you can see passwords as well. So it's the actual that I'm using signing to the account. So the reason this is why this is important, I can change the password any account using the application that I've in front of me. So I can try signing into multiple accounts or applications. So from my understanding to change it, and it's still sitting in free, get a log view in the background. Essentially now I sign in and then I'll get to sign into this account, which I'm going to do right now. So now that it's possible for me to try to sign into this account, to demonstrate that I can use a different username as a password. What I've done that's an attack using the password about. So this just allows you to try to sign in one of the five accounts. I've just this request that was used to perform sign in, and all I've done is parameterize password and call the with this failure option. So I'm going to run this attack right now. And so while this attack is running, we can also attack service using a different network. So what I've got over here is a browser. And what this browser is, it allows me to look like I'm signing in from a different location. So we saw that the is something that's used that is associated with my device. Browser. Some things are also different for you. So the location you sign in from, the sign is different to sign in. So what I'm doing now is changing this. I first sign from a location, which is not where I'm not supposed to sign from, right? And so I'm going to do this and actually to the password being digital and I'm also enabled to get there. It's going to perform a thing like this. So because I know I'm not supposed to sign from here, this is something that I want. It says request denied right here, and now it's attack. So what if it wasn't denied? What if that was? If I signed in for the application, well, we can look at what is that in the background? Because I've tried to sign from just because I trade my account and password with different passwords. We'll see that the user risk is this account. This account is actually on all the way already to phase where if I try to sign again, I have to actually change my password, right? So if I sign again, I'm not sure if it's good already. We see for the attack has been completed.
Looking at time, can you, I think the attack makes sense. That's already a console check with this guess passwords. Show how we detect this.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm doing all of this. So going on, which I'm opening in front of us is as we usually do. So this is we saw I tried to sign in and I explicitly deny him if I sign in from an I did also speak about the factor verification. So we sign in, modification, there's different methods that I sign in, and different stages that have all to be set before you actually get access to service or load this. That's also one of those. So there are different methods that I use to put the data into Azure Sense. So one thing that we've got connected here is actually Azure Activation, which is what allows me to sign from this account. So now just because you don't see the device, you just get it, and then so the device is log or whatever form. So there's some different services to allow you to information of your environment. So every data connector that you've got here has ethical rules associated with it that looks for data and then creates incidents alerts based on in case of we see and no sort of like this. So and put a link to it. So that's what as soon as I try to sign in via Tor browser, right? I can basically see exactly what happened to this user account. So let me just do a review first. So a graph overview of exactly what happened. So one of this, I can see multiple entities associated with this, and entity is just anything that is identifiable, it's a unique identifier, and I just the device user, anything that you get name on your and entity. And so I'm going to investigate this. I'm going to try to find out what actually happened with this account. So why did this trigger? So we see it's a demo account that got it, and I can now see my level associated with this account and why this happened in the first place. So I go back here, just proceed to sign in on this IP address, and which is full browser, which is correct. So and anonymizes and all these also get subject. So you see this as not even a as VSync or something. So I'm using it with this account sign in, and I'm going to quickly show that. So not only is it associated with different IP addresses, things like that, but now you see the events of this alert. If it opens by different, it actually takes you to that background data to tracing exactly what's happening. I can see that because everything's actually in a single format like this. What you actually get through when you ingest data, and now you see where you just signed it from. So I mentioned that there are different things associated with this. So first of all, you see the IP address here. So which is also associated with time. I'm going to thank you deeply. So you see the exact same data that actually during these initial so these data here is the same one, and does it's the same event that you signed. And so then also and the other stuff actually actually place it's what it is. So this is all I think the is also for some account. So if I find it's like as a result, I think you should that we immediately get blocking his contract. So we saw his part. That's it. Like Logan emphasized that was the actual we also just he still got act compromise the password. And act is not sincere bad thing. Different lens of act. It takes 200 days on average. We have at this time. We have full people for some kind of respond for you. Well, obviously, therefore, this happen. So I'm going to share with this line. And then I will think we'll far and might back to you.
It's Jermaine from Meta, and she's going to take the comments. How do you think very much?
Thank you. I'm very good members of the Chamber, and thank you for the opportunity to allow us to share insights into the fraud that we deal with the financial institution, and more importantly, the impact fraud has on your businesses. So traditionally, organizations have always adopted a very reactive approach to fraud, and only really invest in fraud prevention and detection after falling victims to fraud. So we really need to change our perspectives as fraud together with cyber-related crimes are here today. And fraud is an extremely lucrative industry. You'll hear about it in our slides. And with the increase in digitization, you will find that more and more criminals literally have access to your world at the end of a computer. So just on our presentation, we'll briefly cover this slide, which is cost of fraud, payment fraud trends, change of banking details, scams, and a little bit around overview of threat from within. Next slide. Thank you. So the cost of fraud and why does fraud prevention matter? So if you look on the right side, it's estimated that the global annual fraud losses are in the region of 4.5 trillion US dollars. And that's an enormous amount of money, especially if you try and convert that into rands or any of the other countries. It shows just how big it is. And I've been tracking this since about 2012 when I joined the fraud fraternity. And at that time, fraud was estimated to be $1.7 trillion. So that tells you just how rapidly this fraud economy, if we call it that, is growing. So the reason why we really need to mitigate against fraud is really there's a financial impact of losing money and the losses that threaten the sustainability of the business. Is very, very possible. Reputational impact, and this is really one of those intangibles, because what can cause the collapse of major organizations, damage your business reputation, destroy customer confidence in trusted brands. And of course, fraud, as we know, sophisticated syndicates may be involved in more different lines that include human trafficking and human trafficking, terrorism, and drugs. And we don't want to be supporting those kinds of initiatives. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So some of the common payment fraud types that we see in our world really is around unauthorized transactions. And here we're really talking about manual payments, either intercepted by insiders, compromising a payment instruction for their own gain, phishing, push payment fraud. If we look at insider fraud in apologies. Account takeover schemes, these are things there where a user would take over someone's banking profile, impersonate them, and usually transact on their behalf. This is less common in the corporate world, but it's certainly very common and easier done in the individual space. But from a phishing and phishing perspective, these are most, I think prevalent in each of us must receive hundreds of phishing emails a day, usually involved in email, text message from someone purported to be a trusted source, asking for some kind of, sensitive information, and then usually tries to direct you to a fake website or to link credentials. Phishing is a similar form of attack. This is a voice call instead of an email, having the sensitive or personal data. So earlier you heard Thomas give an example of what we would call spear phishing, where emails are targeted to senior executives like a CEO or a CFO, fully understanding their social interests. And when you sort of suddenly thinking about golf, your security hat is probably off, and you click on the link and malware is installed, onto your server or onto your personal device. So really, those are very common, very prevalent, and it's usually what we call a precursor to some of the malware attacks. So malware is really when, as we said, either using phishing emails or by clicking on a link, malicious software is installed on your networks or your devices. This usually gives the hackers, access into your company's domain, your networks, and then this is where they actually monitor your activities from. So that is money for a client. Using remote access tools, a client systems was compromised, malicious software. This resulted in hackers transferring about 10 million rand in multiple fraudulent payments from a corporate client's account using a digital platform. So with the systems and the 2FA, that's second factor, multiple factor device, also compromised, the hackers were able to authorize their own second factor authentication. The other key feature was that the payments were done on a weekend when the staff were on leave, so there'd be a delay in the detection of that payment. The hackers were also able to initiate their payments as they were limited segregation in that design process. So they're very, very prevalent. We see more and more of that, and Thomas, I think, alluded to that in his presentation. From a business email compromise perspective, business email and account email compromise is really one of the fastest growing threat vectors. Per the Internet Crime Report from the FBI release for 2020, I think business email compromise as well as email compromise contribute to $100 billion. So it's around business email compromise outside, but this is some of the common mitigations that you can use. So if you think about only use secure channels to make payments, avoid manual payments where possible, ensure that your antivirus and your software is on, and I think that's exactly what they meant. Also, enforce segregation of duties on all banking platforms. Ensure that you have, robust protection in terms of recon bank reconciliations, and avoid emails to initiate a payment instruction. So let's spend a little bit of time on account change details and business email compromise, because I think these two are probably what we deal with as a financial institution on a daily basis. We spoke about the CEO, CFO impersonation, where once they have been compromised, an email is sent from the CEO's mailbox, so to speak, requesting an urgent transfer of funds to be done. And I usually always say, in this one, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because it could be a legitimate payment, or it should actually have a good process in place. But often people do it and act on it purely out of fear, without checking with anyone, and then later realizes that they've actually executed a fraudulent payment. So when we spoke about business email compromise, it's really when criminals gain entry into a victim's network or device or system using the phishing and malware that we spoke about. And once they're in there, they're able to send instructions to go to the account. Now, change of banking detail scam is something that, as South African companies, we really struggle with. There are lots of our clients that are not as, automated and still, rely on manual payments to pay visitors. The scheme, the form getting sent to a business associate, suggesting that an urgent request for payment. And by the way, please would you also update your banking details. So in this instance, the typical look and feel of the letter is multiple fonts, outdated bank logos, and it will probably be multinational or global corporate. And if you follow the sequence of that scam letter, it will probably be a savings account. So there are a lot of red flags that one can actually look at and sort of filter, but you must be aware of them and you must consciously look for these. So this is usually when payments are done at month and people are pressed for, time and getting payments through, and often they follow the process and they fall victim to these change of banking details. Next slide. So really, the scams and schemes that we spoke about, all of these are sort of a composite view on some of the red flags, what you can actually look for. We often talk about staff training. That is very key. That's not something that we do, once a year and we forget about. With fraud and cyber crimes changing, sort of form every day, we really need to invest in letting our staff, people that operate our controls, have full knowledge of some of the risks involved, the processes that we have. It's a very big thing to consistently train your staff. And then some of the red flags, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is to look for change in writing style and language, discrepancies in documentation, change in font on the same letters, alignment issues, just images that are blurred and messy, if I could put it that way. Sudden changes, suppliers phoning, wanting payment 1 month, and again also in the same breath following up and asking you to change your banking details. So that's something that all the telltale signs that something is not right. The other thing is you can also on the highlight the email address to ensure that the text message and the email sender's address matters. From a payment, that lots can do, it's ultimately how money leaves the bank. So make sure that you have authorized mandates in place with different levels of authority. Instructions should be in writing, preferably to a central mailbox rather than to personal emails. Signature verification processes in place. A robust callback process is absolutely probably one of your golden, still one of your best controls. Last week, into our call center was a request for will be compromised to what we spoke about, email compromise or business email compromise. There was an instruction sent through for about 5 million rand. The call center agent duly called to verify the payment, as is the process, and the client has absolutely no knowledge of that. So, and cure callback is a very key. Make it actually, is a legitimate instruction that the client had knowledge of it. In this case, it wouldn't have just, informed the client of the potential fraudulent payment. It could possibly have been, to Thomas's point, around 200 days that people sit on your server or people are already in your business, and the client had obviously no network or intrusion systems that would have informed them of that before. So segregation of duties is also really important as it relates to authorizing payments. When we talk to authentication, no one should ever fall in account change, because quite simply, I think, over and above the multitude of controls you can have, all banks have something called an account verification system to verify banking before making a payment. So I think if you have suppliers who pay millions of rands, as most corporates do at month end, please ensure that if you do not have a robust system base, that you do actually use the to it. I think some of that is that you can show the party and much I would say approach your banker and ask them to confirm letters. So from a security perspective, we talked briefly about intrusion tools that can help, just protect your email and network environment, and strong system security standards. Don't be tempted by pop-ups and keep your security and antivirus updated. Next slide. So lastly, internal fraud or the threat from inside is really something that is rapidly growing as a threat to organizations. As banks and businesses improve their fraud defenses and fraud mitigation, people with intimate knowledge on the inside often bypass these controls for their own benefit, or sometimes they are approached by these syndicates to collude and defraud an organization. So we always ask the question, why do people commit fraud? We often reference the fraud triangle, which relates to an opportunity. So firstly, there must be harm and we control environment. Pressure really is the push that makes one to perform for fraud. Financial pressure, disgruntled employees, gambling, addictions, lifestyle, any numerous thing that would cause a financial pressure or an emotional pressure on the employee. And lastly, rationalization is really when an honest employee turns rogue and becomes dishonest with this justification. I didn't get a bonus. I worked too hard. I've been here for 20 years. And so the list goes on. And it is in that moment that, someone rationalizes their decision to perpetrate the fraud. There's also the work from home mindset, which means employees are relaxed around controls and they have to just the way it's working. We spoke about fraudulent payments, and really we've spoken about quite a bit of that. I think cash-strapped employees can always look to novice ways to put their hand in the cookie jar, as we call it. They can sometimes work with syndicates, that's another way of managing fraudulent payments. And the individual topic again, I think impacted by the pandemic. More and more companies having skeleton staff and management supervision across companies. These factors all contribute to the stock results, stock deficit of financial stability. And of course, bribery and corruption, something that's so prevalent in our country. This is something that we really struggle with because everyone wants the upper hand when it comes to a tender process, when it comes to having inside information. So often people and employees fall victims to providing, what they think is it's usually sensitive or company confidential, but what they think is just, basic information, with the promise of, tickets to a concert, or starts off with a little bribe and then it grows to something, that can actually become a car. So that's something that, companies also really struggle with because again, it appeals to the employees' psychology they came by. And then lastly, payroll, wage, and ghost employees. This is really quite prevalent, and the software place, etc., that you can manage this kind of fraud in particular. But again, of media privileged access where people pay fictitious employees with the intent to fraud and put their friends on their spouse's account. And most times, these kinds of fraud are not picked up for many years to come. So I just want to talk a little bit about a case study. In fact, there's more than one. But it's a case of, trust me, I'm the financial controller. So usually this happens with employees who are in the company for many years, and we all like to feel part of a family. But sadly, it's sometimes these individuals who are self-questions. And over a period of time, amounts are stolen, and it becomes higher and higher as the fraud goes undetected for years. Greed sets in, the cumulative effect actually is something. At ABSA, we have a detective system where it was implemented to monitor clients who have victims of internal fraud. This way, payments coming to the bank that payments coming to the bank that go into suspect accounts are monitored by bank. And in that initiative, the bank is able to save some of their clients up to 200 million over 2 financial years. In the one instance, the financial manager was about 2 months away from retirement when this tool was implemented. And when the investigation unfolded, it was understood that he had money over the last, 10 years or so, and he might have stolen up to 20 million rand over that period. I also recall an instance not long ago where a CFO, probably was a whaling email, was paid, so I beg your pardon, the CFO paid operating expenses for his game farm using company funds. It's indeed sad when trusted employees turn rogue on us, but this does happen. So what are some of the things that we can do as an organization or as a business is automate your financial controls, ensure that you have clear trail of payments, enforce segregation of duties on all payment platforms, look at lifestyle behavior and defenses, and ensure that you have clear matching on all payments. So that in a nutshell is some of the fraud that we experience as a bank and some of the ways in which we feel that you can mitigate or be aware of the types of fraud that's being perpetrated. And we hope that you found some value in what we had shared. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It's really interesting to see how life has changed so much, especially since we hit the pandemic and we live a lot online. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go into a panel discussion, and I'm going to hand over to the Vice President to moderate the session. Thank you very much.
I think a lot of people start on your insurance or honestly talk about really the figure on paying back and just being neutral and reach that you have how it's still very quite I think a lot of that we come over that only really about so I'm not sure it's from first perspective I think that's my point of view how those things go.
condition. They really didn't want to have more. I remember I'm one of the lecturers with I have policies with and I'm a few unfree. They came so nice, front and center, told everybody got personalized emails, everything. And people are like, oh, I don't know if I'm so comfortable. There was later available, but I think the conference I got very, very cool. Themselves, there's some chat read about it's for offline a week. They never clue to because the world is on it. Just really a label, playing it and letting people know what to do in there.
Please